Active service members, veterans, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stories of Service, an evening with veterans.
On my deployments to combat, I was an infantry soldier and they were always to Iraq. And I've had people ask me, what was it like over there? And I was like, I enjoyed it. And they always look at me like I'm crazy. But I was like, it's more than just the combat aspect. You go to these countries and you get to know the locals, their cultures, their food, everything. And you relate and you connect with these different people over there. And a lot of times these are people that once you leave, you'll never see again. You always wonder, whatever happened to them? Well, we were very lucky tonight to have someone that I was honored to meet last night and to hear his story. As a war refugee in his own country, Abbas Musa became a translator for the U.S. military, saving American lives through his knowledge of Iraq. He was granted U.S. citizenship after immigrating to the U.S. in 2009. Since then, he has become a Grand Slam Moth storyteller, earned a master's degree in economics, and works for the Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Abbas Musa.
Thank you. March 2003, the war started. Everything was shut down, schools, businesses. We stayed at home waiting for the war to end and hoping not to die. On April 9th, we watched the fall of the Saddam's regime on television. Baghdad was somewhat safe right after the war. Terrorists first entered Fallujah, and we heard about the bombings and the fighting there. But in late 2003, they started entering Baghdad and other cities. And I remember in my sophomore year in college, a guy named Ahmed was killed. But in the years that followed, I survived many IEDs and car bombs on my way to school. And hearing about death became the norm. The year I graduated, 2006, Baghdad was the most dangerous place on earth. Beside Al-Qaeda bombing us, we had the Sunni Shia civil war raging on, the Iraqi military was weak, and the police were corrupt. My mom made me quit my job, and she packed me a huge suitcase, and she sent me up north to the safe state of Kurdistan. On my way, when I arrived, the first thing my new boss told me was, I don't need you, right? I only agreed to employ you as a favor to my friend. No one welcomed me at the company, and no one said hello. I felt isolated and invisible. At the end of my first day, I was given a piece of paper for my new address, a small camping trailer. I get there, I knock on the door, a guy answers, and he looked at me without saying a word. I said, I'm your new roommate. I get in, and there was barely a space to put my big suitcase in the aisle between the two beds. And I lay on that little bed with no pillow or blanket, and the night was cold, with no heat in the trailer. I wondered if this so-called escape from Baghdad was worth it. I felt like a homeless man, and it's hard to feel like that when you come from a loving family that provided you with everything you needed. But I told myself that things will get better. I worked hard and I earned my boss's trust, and in a few months, he asked me if I would be interested in running a project on a U.S. Army base. I quickly agreed, but I was scared because I heard so many negative stories about the U.S. military in the media, especially after Abu Ghraib prison scandal happened. Did I make the right decision, I asked myself. Will the U.S. military welcome me, or will they see me as the enemy? But a few days after I arrived to the base, my fears were evaporated. The U.S. soldiers were nice people, just like you and me, from good families, dreams of a good life. And because I wore a cowboy hat to protect my face from the sun, they called me cowboy. And I was like, hell no. In Iraq, a cowboy would be wearing a white man dress surrounded by a bunch of sheep roaming the desert looking for green grass. And I don't want to be that guy. No one wants to be that guy unless you're born a cowboy. And then I heard about the American cowboys. And I was like, that's cool. And I embraced my new nickname. One evening after work, I was at the Iraqi 7-Eleven on the other side of the base. My phone rang. It was my sister, and she was whispering. She said, Dad told me to call you. We left our home and we're at a friend's house, away from the main street. Why, what's happening, I asked. She said the militiamen took over the neighborhood. They planted IEDs along the main street. And they want to attack the U.S. Army military convoy at 8:30 when they pass, like they do every day. Go off. And then she added, can you do something to stop it? I told her, yes, I will. And I jump into my truck and I drive the fastest I could. With tears coming down my face, I imagine the scenario. And I can feel my family being terrified of those militiamen. The ambush would be devastating for the U.S. troops, and it would destroy our neighborhood, and my family could get killed or hurt. And since Baghdad was 6 hours away, so I head to Housing Area 101 because I know the intelligence officers live there. And once I entered the pad, then I checked the first few rows, hoping to find Douglas' name on his door, but it wasn't. And then I see a translator and I asked him, and he didn't know. So I go back to the music man. And once he saw me again, he took off his headphone and he said loudly, I told you I don't know, now leave me alone. I told him, look, U.S. Army soldiers' lives are at the stake here. You need to tell me where Douglas's room is right now. His face turned yellow and he said, the next row, the first or second door. I go and I knock on the second door. Douglas answers in his short and he said, Cowboy, what's up? I told him what my sister told me. He puts his pants on and we go in my truck and we go to the office. He puts me in a room where I can locate our neighborhood on a map. But in Iraq, it's not like you can put an address on Google Maps and get directions, at least not back then. He goes to the classified room to establish a connection with Baghdad, to find the closest base to our neighborhood, and then find the unit that patrols our main street and inform them. And as I'm crying in the room, I drew a map of our main street with all the landmarks, like the mosque and the high school and the soccer field, because those won't show on the map. Douglas kept going back and forth between the classified room and my room, taking my notes, relaying my notes to Baghdad, and this kept going on until it was confirmed that all units will cease their patrol operations that night. I stayed with Douglas until past 8:30. And then my tears started coming down again because I knew we succeeded in saving the convoy and my neighborhood. In July of 2009, I got my special immigrant visa. And I was excited to come here, but I didn't know what to expect. Haunted by Baghdad and my own weakness. I escaped my neighborhood and my city and my country because I couldn't defend it. Yet happily I would accept America as my new home and country. I arrived here with an eagerness for success and to live the American dream. I worked here and there to make a living, and I enrolled in school to get my master's degree. But I missed working for the Army. I missed the military culture. It's the first American culture that I learned. So on June 3rd of 2011, I was sworn in the Wisconsin Army National Guard. And the colonel that I worked for in Iraq, Colonel Garrity, she swore me in herself. It was really a special day for me. From now on, I'll be strong. And if my city or country needed me, I'll be there. I'll never have to run away again.